Welcome to one of the most humane episodes of the XT podcast. Today's episode dives into a question most leaders should ask, but often don't. Are we measuring the right things in CX, or are our metrics giving us a false sense of comfort and control? Joining me is someone who has spent almost 25 years proving that loyalty, engagement, and growth come not from scores or dashboards, but from the stories, motivations, and human signals behind them. Michelle is a certified customer experience professional, business analytics expert, longtime CX leader, and a founding member of Customer Experience Professionals Association. She has led CX from within organizations, advised across industries, and now partners with AI tools like Value Architect to surface insights at scale that actually move the needle. In this conversation, Michelle and I talk about why frontline driven insight is often more powerful than another round of NPS, CSAT, or effort surveys, how empathy becomes a competitive differentiator in an AI first world, and why executives buy. She also shares two outstanding stories: how she turned a vocal CTO detractor into a CX advocate by understanding his priorities and helping him solve his business problems, a masterclass in cross functional influence, and how qualitative insight surfaced a score nearly 50% lower than the company's glowing quantitative metrics, forcing the CEO to confront gaps the numbers had been hiding. This episode is about real growth equation, where AI meets empathy, data meets meaning, and CX finally meets the bottom line. Let's dive in. Hello, Michelle. Thank you so much for joining us at the XT podcast. Appreciate you doing this.
Hi, Ashutosh. It's so great to see you, and I'm excited to have this conversation with you.
Likewise, I want to start with a much deeper question that has been troubling me over the last so many months.
Sure.
And I have read your blogs, I've read your articles, and I feel you would have a much informed opinion on this. And which is that whenever I look at the business landscape today, Michelle, I see that there are a lot of paradoxes here. If we talk to the business leaders, they say that business outcomes are their number one priority, whether it is retentions, cross sell, upsells, referrals, you name it. And for that, they feel customers are of utmost importance. They are investing in CXM platforms, customer insights, and surveys, and research, and so on. But on the flip side, if you were to truly analyze the voice of customer, you would hear that the customers are saying that they're not being heard, they are not being addressed in terms of their true expectations and requirements. In fact, even the frontline teams say that they are not involved, they are not being involved in decision making and customer programs. So there seems to be some gap in terms of what the business leaders want to do versus what they seem to be doing, and none of them seem to be aligned. So where are we going wrong? What's the gap here, and how to address that, how to fix it?
I love this question, Ashutosh, because I think that there's so much going on right now. Like you said, there's so much investment going on. It's really at an all-time high, but there's still this gap. There's customers are losing trust. They're not as satisfied as they were just a few years ago. There's a really great study that just came out back in November. Broadridge Financial Solutions. I don't know if you've heard of them, but it's an incredible study. It's large, over 4,000 American and Canadian consumers,
Wow.
and they found that of those consumers, customer dissatisfaction is at an all-time high. It's at
Right.
an all-time high. 71% of consumers are saying that companies need to improve their customer experience. They're not satisfied. That's 2 times more than in 2019. So
Wow.
that's growing. Their customers are continuing to lose trust in these companies. So as you're still investing in all of these tools and survey platforms and all of these things, how are we still losing customers?
Right.
And even as you mentioned, I love talking about your employees as being a huge part of customer experience, and employees don't feel like they're being heard either. And I know that's a topic that you and I have talked about in the past, and we'll talk more about today. Something else to talk about that I wanted to mention, over the summer, I wrote an article with CXM Today, published there, called Stop the Survey Madness, 3 CX Mistakes Costing Trust. And, the premise is that customers are tired of not getting what they need.
Sure.
We're sending tons of surveys out there. We've got all the survey platforms. They're exhausted with receiving these surveys. And I'm going to confess, and you can tell me what you think, but I'm in the business. And when I receive surveys now, I don't fill them out. I delete the email.
Yes.
I ignore the text message, whatever it is. I'm so tired of it.
Yes.
And again, we're in the business. So my premise for this article was really talking about, okay, is it the surveys themselves, or what is it? And how can we work on improving this?
Right.
So no, surveys are not all bad, but what I'm saying is, mistake number one is what I talk about is that survey paralysis with no action. So, hey, we're doing surveys, we're asking customers a bunch of things, but then we're not taking action on it.
Right.
Probably the majority of data that's captured is not being acted on. So why are we doing it? If you're just focused on your NPS or your CSAT, that quant score, you're missing the boat. There really needs to be the action. We need to be talking more about action and results. So stop just talking about NPS, CSAT, and those types of metrics, and start talking about everything in terms of actions, what actions you're taking to improve the experience, and what are the results from those actions. If that resonates with you. And then I'll go on with two more mistakes that I outlined.
Oh, love to.
Mistake number 2 is just kind of focusing on surveys as being the only thing. And I know we'll talk a little bit more about this today, but there's so many VOC vendors, and there's so many surveys out there. And actually even the big VOC vendors, Medallia, Qualtrics, and others, are recognizing that response rates are at an all-time low. So that's another challenge that we have with using surveys. People, as we said, we're tired of it. People are not responding to these surveys. Maybe they're not designed really well. Maybe they are, and people are still just tired. So there's so many other places to get good data. There's call logs, there's transcripts, there's interviews. And one of the things that I love the most, that I'll talk about more a little bit later, is going to your frontline employees. Your frontline employees, your own folks, are a really under-leveraged part or source of voice of customer data. And mistake number 3 that I talked about is not fully utilizing your qualitative data. So even if you have it, you have all of these different sources, you're not using it as much, right? We're focusing much more still on the quant. So I would just say, don't forget the qual, right? There's a lot of good stuff that we can find in our qualitative data. So I don't know if that resonates with you. What are your thoughts on that?
Beautiful. And so much to unpack here, Michelle. I completely resonate with your answer. It's a dense response, and there's so much to unpack. The first mistake is the obvious culprit in most organizations that I work with as well. I mean, they get a lot of insights but never act. And then what's the point? Yeah. I'm curious about the second to begin with, which is, you mentioned that the most under-leveraged asset would be the frontline employees themselves. And, instead of asking customers these surveys and driving survey fatigue, why don't we ask the frontline employees what should be done, because they might be aware. How do we make them invested in giving us these answers and ideas, and improving the customer experience in general? What should we, as customer experience leaders, professionals, and what should the brands do to make this happen?
Yeah, you mentioned a few things there in the question, but first, so talking about frontline employees, I have been for nearly 2 decades utilizing frontline employee panels as a big part of our voice of customer programs within the companies I've been a practitioner leader in, and with clients. And when you bring them together and you ask them questions about what employees want and need, and how you can make their jobs easier, how can you empower them more, there's some really neat light bulbs that go off in those types of sessions with employees. Our employees are used to answering questions in a survey, the pulse surveys or the annual engagement surveys, that type of thing. And they're not quite accustomed to us asking them really about what customers are saying. And what's beautiful is when you bring a cross-functional frontline employee team together. So you got people from sales, you have some people from finance, you have people from service, from across the organization. And they start to share what customers are saying and doing and thinking and needing. There's some really magical things that happen with that, and so we've done it where we do customer journey mapping. We do it where we're bringing the data to these employees and asking them how does it resonate with them? What are they hearing from customers, and start mapping that out. And then we go into even ideation and design, which happens almost naturally, because when they start to talk about what some of the challenges are with customers, they have ideas, and then, as I just mentioned, to really engage them and make them want to be a part of this, you have to talk about the empowerment. You have to talk about what are some of the challenges that they have in order to deliver the experience that they want to deliver. Most of our frontline employees, they have their hearts in the game. They want to be able to deliver. And sometimes we may not have a tool for them, or we may not have a process or something in place that would make things a lot easier for them to manage the customer and work with them and deliver the experience that we want to deliver. So that's one way.
I love where you're going with this, but I happen to notice that you talked about multiple cross-functional leaders being in the same room: sales, contact center, customer support, marketing, you name it. Has it ever happened that they themselves are surprised with what the other teams are doing, and that they were never been made aware of all that the other teams are doing, and that brings in more empathy and collaboration and, I don't know, more team mindset? Has that happened as well?
Absolutely. That's what you're talking about, is some of the magic that happens when you bring people together from across all of the areas. They don't, many times in our jobs, we are reviewed based on our role in our area.
Correct.
And when we get together with these other areas and we start hearing about challenges that they have or what customers are saying, there's amazing magic that happens. So much that goes on between service and sales. For example, when salespeople hear the challenges that customers are having, then they start thinking, well, I thought I covered that with them. Okay. And then the other people in the room, marketing, or even we've also included people that are not necessarily frontline, but all of the people working together and saying, hey, maybe sales needs an extra tool to be able to provide information to the customers. Amazing magic that happens. But one other way to sort of gel, to go back to your question initially, one of the other ways to really have them gel with what's going on is to provide sort of this closed loop. We talk a lot about closed loop with customers.
Correct.
We captured data from customers, and then we never go back and say, hey, we've taken this step. What do you think about it? Sometimes we do. Most of the time we don't. But what we need to do also with our employees is, hey, we captured these amazing insights, rich insights from you during our sessions. And here are the actions that we've taken. And we'd love to hear from you, to hear, are you hearing improvements? Are you hearing some things from customers that they feel that? And do you feel like we've provided you with that empowerment? That's a way different discussion that you're having with your employees than you have in an engagement survey.
Of course.
So anyway, closed loop is really important with your employees as well as with your customers.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I think you pointed out the mistake too, and kind of gave us how to address that as well, how to execute and ensure that the mistake doesn't happen. In fact, if I may, therefore, then jump to the mistake 3. Michelle, you mentioned that we need not keep on focusing only on the quantitative, because there's so much of qualitative data available out there. You named a few channels as well. You talked about the alternate channels, call logs, contact center scripts, transcripts, you name it, reviews, and so on. I wonder, if I was to be asked what's the benefit of each, for me, quantitative brings in an objective lens. There is a score, there's a metric that we can compare, there could be a trend line, whereas qualitative, there's a lot of data. With AI, maybe we can get insights, but it's not measurable. We cannot compare it. In your work, I know you focus a lot on qualitative. Have you ever worked on a program where you managed to objectify the qualitative as well and prove that there's merit in focusing on that and getting value out of it as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'll share a story of a recent client of ours. It was a B2B client, and we used a lot of qualitative. They had a quant score when we started. They had their satisfaction score, which was actually quite high, something like, let's say 4.6 out of 5. And so I know. So initially it was the thought when we started meeting with people was, we've got a pretty high customer satisfaction. So what,
Right.
why are we doing this? What are we looking at? So initially we captured some insights through interviews of the leadership team. Then we captured insights from frontline employees and the cross-functional team. And then we went to customers to validate what we had already heard from the internal teams. And there's a lot of shiny tools out there. There's a lot of new things, right, for us to use. And as you mentioned, AI, there's a lot of things that we can have now at our fingertips to use to help us get data, get some actual insights and some actions out of the data that we're capturing.
Sure.
I happen to use a tool called Value Architect, and full disclosure, I'm actually a strategic business partner because I love it so much. And it's really a differentiated thing. So it's basically an insights modeling pipeline that can help you to not only dig deeper into your insights at scale and super fast, but it also creates segments from your qualitative data. And most exciting for me with this particular client is that it helps us to quantify the qualitative data. So there's a
Wow.
qualitative score that based on all of the data that's being captured that you provide into Value Architect, and it provides this qualitative score. So in our deliverable to this client, we incorporated, of course, the initial quantitative score that we were looking at and that everyone was proud of, which they should be. And then we included also side by side, we included the qualitative score as well, which the qualitative score was 2.5. So it was almost half, a little bit more than half of the quant score. And when we presented this to the leadership team, the CEO instantly went to that. And we called it at the time a sentiment score, but it's the same thing that now is called this qualitative score. And he said, what's this? We said, well, we dug deeper into all of the data that was captured from the internal team and from customers. And here's what they're really telling us. And so it's a valuable tool or approach to use to be able to really turn people's heads on the leadership team and have people focus, okay, this is really the value of analyzing your qualitative data. And then what can you do with that qualitative data? There are recommendations, there are segments that you can capture from it, fingerprints, all of that. But this was a time that I utilized a tool and we quantified the qual, and it was just super effective in getting attention of the leadership team.
Beautiful. I mean, this is so interesting, Michelle. I've so far never heard anyone talk about quantifying the qualitative insight. You and your platform partner clearly have worked this way out. So I'll be very curious to dig deep into this, hopefully in the next episode. Your story also highlights something more significant, which is also about getting leadership buy-in to your CX program. I mean, thanks to your quantified qualitative score, you had now the attention of the CEO, and who possibly would now listen to what you have to offer to fix the gaps. I wonder what would be your recommendations to get this buy-in, because that's another challenge which most CX leaders world over face: how to get the buy-in from not just the CEO but also the functional peers, the sales heads, the marketing heads, the customer success heads, you name it. Is there any approach that you have followed successfully that gets us this buy-in as well? I would love to know.
Yeah, I think that this is one of the most, for me, fascinating challenges that we as CX leaders have that we have to deal with. I sort of consider some of this like a chess game. It's very strategic.
Right.
But what I have done in the past that has worked really well is to actually go and talk to the leaders and ask them really what are some of their challenges, describe it in their terms. So it's sort of, you have to think about this as that question of what's in it for me in
Right.
order to really get some of that engagement. I also think that as you dig into that with these leaders, asking them what, as I said, their greatest challenges, find out what really moves them, and then work with them to support that, provide customer data that may help them with that. I once had and I'll share a story with you that just seems to resonate with folks as I share it. But I used to, as I was building a CX practice for a multinational company, probably a long time ago, 17, 18 years ago, I had a CTO who was sort of the loud voice in the room in all of the leadership meetings. He was starting to hear about customer experience, and he was really not a fan. He would come by my office and he would say things and sort of make fun of what we were doing, customer experience. What is this is just fluffy stuff. This makes no sense. And so he was sort of a loud voice, and I don't understand why we need to do this. So I woke up one morning and I said, all right, I'm just going to go stare right in the face of this person, and I'm going to find out what is moving him, what's going on. So I asked him for 15 minutes of his time and had a sit down with him and said, really, what is your biggest challenge that you're struggling with right now? What keeps you up at night? That's the other question, the magic question, right? What keeps you up at night? And he shared that, hey, we're doing some new technology things, moving to new technology. I still have to manage my existing part of the business
Sure.
with constantly decreasing budget. So he was struggling with managing our network and moving forward with shrinking budget. And so I said, well, that's a challenge that I think we can help you with. Would you be willing to work with us and let us take a look with your team and see how we can provide some customer data that would help you with that challenge? Would you be open to that? And he sort of laughed a little bit and he said, yeah, sure, go ahead, have at it. I said, all right, we're going to work with your team. Came back, worked with my amazing team. I'll say Patricia Davidson is a person that I've worked with for a while. I'm just going to mention her name, a little shout out. She and our team worked really closely with this technology team and came up with a network experience program that was able to provide them with customer data that helped them to tweak the network and prioritize where they needed to make changes to the existing network so that they would be able to use their budget more wisely. And in the end, that really turned over that relationship. Then we started to see that it was having an impact. He would share this impact in leadership team meetings and say, actually, this customer data has really helped us to do what we need to do, and became really sort of an advocate. I wouldn't say that he was shouting off the rooftops, but he went from being sort of a detractor to being an advocate and a supporter of what we were doing. So going back to that question of what's in it for me and what keeps you up at night, I think if we really think about the leaders across functional areas across the organization in those terms, and we talk to them and we share that data with them, it's amazing how you can bring teams along, bring leaders along, and get them much more engaged.
Beautiful. I mean, of all the answers that you have given, Michelle, if there's one thing common, it's the stories that you are bringing to the conversation. And that probably makes the inference much easier because I see that this is another element which is missing from the CX conversations that we have within our offices, that the storytelling isn't used as well as it should. I know you're a very staunch advocate of it, Michelle, and therefore I would love to have you give us CX professional a glimpse into what storytelling could truly do for us. So one example is exactly what you just mentioned: get the buy-in from the leaders. Converting a detractor into an advocate. What a beautiful story you just told. But also a lot more. To get people engaged, the frontline people a bit more open to participate and provide more insights. There's a lot to be done. Would love to know your thoughts on how storytelling is important and how best it could be leveraged for CX in general.
Sure, I can give a couple of examples of that. One is that it's important, we know as CX leaders, that it is important to always be at the table and make sure that the customer is at the table as we make decisions about the company and offers and everything. And so bringing the customer to key meetings with the leadership team, whether it's all together or one-off, bringing those stories. We would bring audio recordings of customers talking to customer service.
Right.
Some of them were positives and some shared some of the challenges that customers were having. And it's amazing how when you start a meeting, when you start your portion of the meeting or your presentation with stories directly from the customer's mouth, how you can hear a pin drop in the room. It's very quiet. They're listening intensely at what the customer's saying. So you can use audio recordings. We've also created videos of a compilation of customers. Particularly, you can do it around products, you can do it overall, you can do it to test certain things. Actually creating, and now with even iPhones, you can just do this so easily.
Yes.
Back then we actually we had to produce a video, but there's so much that you can do. Bringing that video makes, again, them see the faces, not only hear the voices, but see the faces. And it really brings them closer to the customer. Just storytelling in general, even if you can't do that, stop just sharing slides with charts on them. Show the customer journey, show a story. So we would create with using a real customer with a real customer face. Here's where this customer is, the segment the customer's in, and share that journey. You can highlight visually. In one slide, you can highlight everything. You can highlight where their high points are, where their low points, their challenges are, where those moments of truth are that we really need to focus on. And then you can share the data underneath that so that you tell the story of this customer. You show that impact that it's having on the business and how much revenue the customer is providing you with, and all of that in one slide. And that type of storytelling is also hugely effective. It takes a little more time to create that one slide, but it's so much more useful and impactful when you create that versus just using charts, which is where we end up being in leadership team meetings.
Cannot agree more. Michelle, in fact, if I may, bring another article of yours in reference here. You mentioned one, which I'll of course give a link to for all the listeners. The link to the articles that we're mentioning and even the platform that Michelle mentioned would be in the description of the video. But there's this one article, Michelle, which I genuinely loved, which was your story about your trip to Mexico and the JW Marriott that you stayed in. For me, it was the best example of storytelling. It kind of told us CX professionals what to look for, how a brand delivers an exceptional CX, what are the ways in which it could be executed elsewhere. I would love to have you quickly recount that as well, if you can. I'll of course share the link to the article in the description, but I feel that's another example, because a lot of times CX professionals do a wonderful job of driving the best experience, but they may not necessarily do the best way of articulating what they have done or their understanding in their resumes, in their CVs. For all the professionals who are trying to skill themselves or grow up in their career, this storytelling for themselves is equally important, right? And I feel your article gives an example into both. I would love to have you recount that story.
Sure. I would love to. So this is an absolute personal, true story that is also important as we share personal stories with the teams. And I use this at the start of keynotes or start of leadership team strategy meetings when they're getting started with CX, because it shows the holistic nature of what customer experience is. So I did a lot of travel in Latin America, and particularly Mexico. I spent a lot of time traveling to, and then had the good fortune of living there for a few years as well, working there. But I hadn't been to the same JW Marriott for a few years because I had been working in the other part of the city, and then came back to the JW Marriott that I used to stay in a few years earlier. And I got out of the car and immediately I was greeted by them. They knew who I was. They remembered me. They escorted me in to the front desk. And all along the way, I felt like the feeling that I had was one of being like the queen or a princess, as I was walking in. And subsequent things that happened, the front desk employee engaging with me, they're saying, you haven't been with us in so long. We've missed you. How have you been? All of those things. And the other aspects of even going into their restaurant, it was a completely tied point to point experience that I was having. They also knew in the restaurant that I hadn't been there in a while and they missed me. Now, I mean,
Wow.
yes, they maybe recognized my face because they knew I was there, but then when they would use 𝗟𝗫𝗄 Batt, they would use my name. And then the other aspect, just a really tiny detail, I would call down at the time, we were calling down, I'd call down for a backup call, a wake up call in the morning, just to make sure that I was for sure awake. And they, in many hotels, they would say, 𝗟𝗫𝗄 Batt,
Right.
how can we help you, when they would answer the call, because more naturally there were more traveling male business people than women. So they knew it was 𝗟𝗫𝗄 Batt. They answered the phone like that. Just this
Beautiful.
feeling exuding from every touch point, every experience that I was having in this JW Marriott. And so after this experience, I'm thinking, okay, I'm in CX. How are they doing this? So as I tell this story to people, the audience, I'm thinking, okay, what's my goal? I want them to understand the breadth of what customer experience is.
Of course.
It's consistent experience, fantastic across these key touch points. And then I want them to think about what is making it happen. So I asked the question, okay, how it made me feel amazing, right? It brings in the emotion to the whole question. And how is the JW Marriott able to deliver this amazing experience to me? And so, and then I asked for engagement, interaction. And so people say, well, it's their people. They hire good people. They train them really well. Then how did they know I was coming back? Well, they use their
Right.
systems and the data, and they have their reporting and all of that. And then, okay, so with all of this, what does this make me want to do with this experience when I leave? What's the end result of all of this? Well, I will recommend this hotel to everyone, talk about it, very positively. And what ended up happening is I actually wrote about it as well. And so then I amplified it on social media. So to me, it's sort of a full circuit. It's always a circus, a full circuit story, right? Of how and why we do customer experience. And when we do it well, the impact that it can have. So I think about, when we think about storytelling, first we need to think about, what is our goal? What's the outcome? What do we want people to get out of the story that we're telling?
Of course.
And then walk through some steps so that people can engage and interact with us, asking questions. How do they create this incredible experience? What do I do with this experience? What happens after I have the experience? All of that. And then finally, you make sure that everything is sort of tangible, the tangible outcomes, that referral, going back to that goal for your audience. You need to think about, okay, did I reach that goal? Do they get it? Is it resonating with them? That's all really important part of storytelling. And I love using storytelling, and I'm still learning approaches, new ways to tell stories. I probably could have told a story better even in this podcast, Ashutosh, So we're all still learning, but storytelling is really powerful. And it's a great way to gain traction and gain engagement as well.
Well, very subtly, Michelle, you also conveyed two other important aspects for every CX professional: to be humble, to be able to admit that this could be done better, and to being open to feedback. Continuous feedback, continuous learning, because we'll always have to be on our toes. Keep learning. With the advent of AI now, I think this storytelling, this empathy, this importance of culture, and all of this is going to be much more pronounced. I guess
Yeah.
all of that calls for another episode, but truly wonderful, Michelle. I think this has been a very humane episode that we have had so far. A lot of takeaways, and loved how you brought in the stories, the impact points, which I'm sure the listeners would value. Thank you so much for being on the show, Michelle. And I would love to have you another time to talk about a lot of other things that we missed, hopefully soon. Thank you once again.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's been fun. I love talking to you.
Pleasure. Thank you.